There's simply no other way to explain it. J1 Seider to Notre Dame is a massive loss for Penn State. And then Nicholas Singleton and Kaytron Allen, are they going to follow him too? We got a lot to discuss here.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And as always, thank you so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. My name is Zach Seyko, and I'm your host of the show. You are locked on to Penn State football here as, well, it is Super Bowl Sunday, but I guess we have something a little more, I don't know about, exciting's not the right word here, but interesting, surprising to say the least, as running backs coach, co-offensive coordinator, someone that's been on staff for 7, 8 seasons at Penn State. 6, somewhere in that neighborhood, definitely over 5 years. And he's going to be making a lateral move to Notre Dame. This isn't a promotion. I had talked about, speculated that J1 Seider eventually could be leaving sooner rather than later, but it was always under the understanding that it was going to be for a head coaching job somewhere maybe back in Florida where he's very familiar with, where he's been. And that's not the case. This is a lateral move to Notre Dame, so we got plenty to talk about. Is there concern here with Nicholas Singleton and Kaytron Allen? What does this loss mean for Penn State, and why is he leaving? Among a variety of things, this is also a live show, so bring your comments as well. Let's start off with the actual impact itself. I mean, this is a big loss. This is a massive loss, in my opinion. There might be some people that say, well, there are questions around his ability to develop, and other than, I guess, in a sense of a Ricky Slade or a Kevon Lee, I think that J1 Seider has proven that he is a very competent and capable running backs coach. But it's really the impact in recruiting. J1 Seider, forgive me because I don't remember the outlet that nominated him, but he was just recognized as the best overall recruiter in college football. Think about that for a moment. Everybody's considered here. Head coaches, recruiting coordinators, right? Penn State has built out its recruiting staff. And J1 Seider is nominated as the best overall recruiter. So that is what Penn State is losing here, is the recruiting impact. The highway into Florida, the connections that he has down in Florida. That is a massive loss in itself because there is so much talent that comes from the state. I understand, dominate the state, focus on Pennsylvania first, and then branch out close, right, to the Mid-Atlantic, the Northeast, New Jersey, Maryland, Ohio, and then maybe extend beyond Florida. But we can't deny the fact that there is a lot of high school talent that comes out of the state of Florida. And J1 Seider was a big part of that. Was he necessarily the lead recruiter every time? No, but he just allowed for that connection to be built. He helped get the conversation started and was a closer in some sense as well too. So think recruiting, I don't know if it's going to take a step back, but it's certainly going to take a shift. Penn State does have Phil Troutwine, but if you have reinforcements, right, it is nice to have multiple Florida connections, multiple Southeastern connections, and now you don't have that. And Notre Dame does. So it's not only that Penn State is losing this, but he's not taking a head coaching job. He's not going to another institution that doesn't really have an impact on Penn State. Notre Dame goes up against Penn State for a lot of recruiting battles. Tyler Merrill just committed to Notre Dame over Penn State. He is an in-state Pennsylvania offensive guard that Penn State missed out on, and I think he's the second overall Pennsylvania prospect. Now, J1 Seider didn't play a role in that. My point is that Notre Dame and Penn State go up against each other in a lot of recruiting battles. So you not only lose a friend, he becomes an enemy. He's somebody that you're going to be recruiting against, and if he's dubbed as the best overall recruiter in the country, well, the battles don't get any easier. So recruiting first and foremost. He brought Nicholas Singleton and Kaytron Allen to Happy Valley. He was able to recruit some of the best, even if they didn't become these incredible superstar running backs like Nicholas Singleton and Kaytron Allen, like they are going to be. They are presently, but I'm talking about future NFL because Ricky Slade never really panned out. Noah Cain dealt with injuries and ultimately transferred out. Journey Brown had the off-the-field medical conditions that kept him. So there was a lot of circumstantial things that, well, J1 Seider's not the best running back developer. I disagree. Anybody that says that Seider is an okay assistant coach, that Penn State can fill the void, that he's okay as a running backs coach, that is simply not true. Cam Wallace was a fringe 3-star, was somebody that was going to play a lot and then ended up suffering an injury. He was able to get Quentin Martin to commit to Penn State, as well as a Corey Smith. Corey Smith was developing appropriately as well as a true freshman. If there was a need for him to play, he could have given them meaningful snaps last season, but instead they were allowed to gradually increase the workload there. This is crucial. It's a matter of how Penn State is going to respond. There was the anticipation that eventually he was going to leave sooner rather than later, that this was going to happen, probably in the form of, he interviewed for the Florida Atlantic. For those who don't know, he was interviewing for the Florida Atlantic head coaching job, did not get it, but he was one of the finalists, and it was close. And it's something that I talked about on the show. I guess it's been a month, maybe 2 months since I addressed that, but he talked about taking a job for the right reasons, for the right decision. Why ultimately? And then we'll talk about Nicholas Singleton, Kaytron Allen, and what the concern level is there, because people have brought it up. It's a possibility, but we'll get to it. Why did he go to Notre Dame? If you really want if you want the short answer of it, financials, money, and then the personal reasons. They've been at Penn State, the J1, and when I say they, J1 Seider and his family have been at Penn State for a long time. And I think of the fact that J1 Seider is, probably in his mind, due for something where he's able to move up. He never got the offensive coordinator position. He interviewed for it, right? He's been the co-OC, running game coordinator, recruiting specialist, running backs coach. At some point, you want to move up. You want to move on. So Jim Knowles more or less did the same thing. He goes to Penn State, gets a pay raise, and just gets a fresh start. So to criticize Seider and say, why would he do this? It's a lateral move. Jim Knowles just did the same thing, and Penn State just made the same type of play where they went and poached a really respected, a world-renowned coach at the college football level away from, I don't want to toss around the word rival, but with all the head-to-head battles, and we just saw Notre Dame just can't leave Penn State alone, right? They got to kick them while they're down. They beat them in the national semifinal, and they go and take away the best overall recruiting member on staff. So J1 Seider is doing this because Notre Dame probably offered a contract that makes him one of the highest paid positional coaches in the country. And sometimes a change of scenery just makes sense. He's been at Penn State for a long time, and there was no more upward mobility. What could J1 Seider do after this? He could try his hand again at a potential offensive coordinator spot if and when it opens with Andy Kotelnicki. Is that happening next offseason guaranteed? Do we know that Kotelnicki is right? It's interesting because Seider has wanted a promotion, and he doesn't exactly get that, but at least he gets some financial, and then eventually maybe he could use this to leapfrog into something bigger, an offensive coordinator role. I thought West Virginia was a possibility where he could, because he played there once upon a time, and the offensive coordinator job at West Virginia, or it's not going to happen now, but you get what I'm saying, is that he deserves eventually a better title, more responsibility. He views himself as more than just a running backs coach, co-OC. But in this process, as he does this for one more season, at least, maybe another season, that eventually he will get that big break in his coaching career. All right, Nicholas Singleton and Kaytron Allen. I bet people are on the edge of their seat if those two running backs, because the spring transfer portal window looms, could they follow J1 Seider to Notre Dame? We'll talk about that and some more and get your comments in from the live chat here in the upcoming segment on this live edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. Today's episode is brought to you by Wayfair. The holiday hustle, it seems like it's been a long time ago, but it is over, and there's nothing like giving your home a little TLC after the holidays. Now, decluttering, refreshing your space, it can help you get back into the routine. Whether you're tidying up, clearing out, or you just want to give your space a new look to start the year, Wayfair has everything you need, and it's all within your budget. You can currently look at the furniture available on Wayfair, and there's a huge selection. It makes it easy to find the pieces that will fit your style and your budget. The best part is the free and hassle-free delivery, even for larger items. Wayfair's site is so easy to navigate, and you'll find anything and everything you need in no time. So there's something for each and every style, every home, no matter type of space, type of budget. Wayfair makes it easy to, if you're procrastinating your New Year's home goals, Wayfair is the place to go because they have endless inspiration for every type of space. And Wayfair can help you in a time crunch. Delivery is free, fast, and hassle-free, as I've mentioned. Give your home the refresh it needs with Wayfair. Head over to wayfair.com right now. That is WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. Nicholas Singleton, Kaytron Allen, will they be leaving for Notre Dame? Talk to some of my sources because this is intriguing. J1 Seider is part of the reason they came to Penn State, especially Kaytron Allen. He was at IMG Academy from the southeast part of the country. Okay, J1 Seider's recruiting connections. I did have some concern that Kaytron Allen would enter the portal. I thought Nicholas Singleton, because he's from Pennsylvania, he's from central Pennsylvania, that Penn State would be able to still retain him. And it sounds like both are going to stay. Both running backs are going to stay at Penn State. They're locked in for a national championship run. And there is no worry, at least, that they're going to go into the transfer portal. But could the same be said for a Cam Wallace, a Quentin Martin, or a Corey Smith? That's left to be seen, because Singleton and Allen are the clear-cut starters. What is the game plan for a Cam Wallace who's eventually going to come back from injury and was developing properly under J1 Seider? I mean, that's he's from the state of Georgia. There's not a lot of business for a former three-star prospect who committed just before early National Signing Day at the time for the class of 2023 to not follow his running backs coach. That would make sense. So it's a stronger possibility that any of Cam Wallace, Quentin Martin, and Corey Smith. Now, I'm not declaring that they go. I am not declaring that they go into the spring transfer portal window and leave Penn State. But it is a stronger possibility and a bigger concern from my point of view than a Nicholas Singleton and Kaytron Allen, who just have one more season. And those guys are ready to play. If Cam Wallace comes back 100% healthy, he can start at some other places. Now, Notre Dame's running back room is pretty crowded. Jeremiah Love is coming back. And I know they still have some of the other rotational players as well. So J1 Seider is going to Notre Dame not only for a financial increase. Notre Dame is pretty, I hate to say it, pretty easy to sell, pretty easy to pitch and recruit prospects from anywhere in the country. He's got those Florida connections, but that running back room is pretty stout as it is. So I say my concern level is slightly higher because I have the confidence that Nicholas Singleton and Kaytron Allen stay, but that doesn't mean that there isn't that worry that Quentin Martin or Cam Wallace or Corey Smith could go themselves. I still hold out confidence that it is still unlikely, but just never say never from there. So let's join the live chat. Let's have the live chat join the show and talk about more on J1 Seider. We will be fine without his recruiting ability, as revenue sharing will help us not get outbid by Oregon for every 5-star. That's a good point. Penn State, I think that's part of the reason why Drew Aller, Singleton, Allen, Denai Dennis Sutton, Zane Durant were able and willing to pass up on their dreams of the NFL for one more season to come back. Revenue sharing is a big part of it. Who would replace him? I'm going to talk about that now. I was going to save that for the final segment. I will be honest and say that it is difficult to project position coach replacements. It is easier to do this for coordinators because you can see they're looking for upward mobility. You have to basically predict that somebody is going to leave for a lateral move. Nobody saw J1 Seider to Notre Dame coming. Nobody saw that. I was just trying to enjoy my Super Bowl Sunday, man. And now I got to talk about this. This wasn't really remotely on anybody's radar. Notre Dame made a phone call, made a financial pitch, and it made sense for Seider and his family. So As far as a name to watch, I can give one now, but talk about it more in the upcoming segment. Stan Drayton, former Temple head coach, connections to Penn State wants to dominate the state. This is how you do it. You get somebody with Philadelphia connections, eastern part of Pennsylvania, New Jersey. Stan Drayton can certainly be that, and that would be, I think, definitely an A-plus hire for Penn State if they do go in that direction. But we'll see. Good point. I'm talking about the running backs that are currently present, that are actually with Penn State. I just really hope Messiah Mickens doesn't follow him, Zach. That's a good point. Class of 2026. Now, Messiah Mickens did say that his recruitment was shut down, that he's all in on Penn State, the 107% locked in, whatever have you, whatever they say when they shut down their recruitment. But that's what Messiah Mickens said. These are high school players at the end of the day. There's no indication that he could change his decision. It's certainly, J1 Seider was a big part of his recruitment. However, Mickens, like a Nicholas Singleton, is a Pennsylvania native. So I think it's the same thing with Kaytron Spell, and that's a class of 2027 we're talking about here. But those two running backs, I think, because they are Pennsylvania natives, are more likely to stay with Penn State because they're committed to Penn State. They're committed to James Franklin. That's the consistent part of this. Seider's moving on. And especially in the scheme of the national title, talking about how this is one of the best coaching staffs and kind of bragging and not necessarily bragging, but pointing out the fact that Penn State really has one of the most complete coaching staffs in the entire country for a national title run. And J1 Seider just kind of disrupts the flow of that. Phil Troutwine, Anthony Poindexter, to add in a Jim Knowles, Andy Kotelnicki, right? The band's all back together. I would understand if J1 Seider had left after this final run at a national title, but clearly that wasn't enough to keep him around. I find that the most intriguing part of all of this is, I guess if you think that you're not going to get a pay raise any other time, then you go for it. If you don't think you're going to get a move like this, at the end of the day, that you take it. But he's giving up a national title run. There was a reason for him to stay at least one more season. That's not to say that Notre Dame isn't going to be in that same position, but to spend all that time in Penn State and then get right there, you're close to the mountaintop with achieving this goal, and then that will go a long way in the hiring process for any job. And you're just scrapping it and saying, I'm going to go to Notre Dame. Title run be darned at Penn State. Anthony Poindexter is staying around. He got a contract extension. You add in Jim Knowles. Again, I wonder if that had any impact on it, because J1 Seider has bided his time. He's put in the hard work, and he's never really had that upward mobility past associate head coach. And it's not like these titles are easy to come by, but co-offensive coordinator, associate head coach, running backs coach. Hey, you're one of our lead recruiters, but we can only offer you so many pay raises. You can't offer him what other titles do you give him? He wants to be more than just a running backs coach. And I know it's a lateral move, but at the end of the day, J1 Seider, I don't think is going to be at Notre Dame for the next 3, 4, 5 years. I think this is a 1 to 2 year plan with the hopes that he does get a head coaching job. And he's landing at a spot where he probably feels that he's either going to get the same to help his resume, the same impact to help his resume, or that it's going to be better. I mean, they do have Jeremiah Love. Notre Dame's in a really good spot. He is not taking a step back in terms of brand power and resources and everything else. And he's recruited in this area. That's why I don't really like this move, because it's not only you're losing one of the best parts of your staff, now you're competing against him. You are competing against J1 Seider. So yeah, talk about Messiah Mickens, please. He shut down his recruitment. I won't try to psychologically analyze the decisions of high school football players or high school athletes in general. Anything can change, but that's not something that is a red alert to me that Messiah Mickens is it possible? Is J1 Seider not going to recruit him? No. He's certainly going to say, hey, Messiah, would you change your mind? Would you consider otherwise? And a conversation is going to be had. It's whether or not Messiah Mickens responds. So, bad time to leave, only downside. But Franklin, I imagine that's a typo. Franklin will find somebody. Yes, we'll talk about potential replacements in the final segment. I mean, Penn State is going to be okay at the end of the day. This just, let's be honest about what this is in terms of a national title run, the consistency, the continuity of the coaching staff, the potential allure of running backs going into the transfer portal. It's all present. I think the biggest part of this is actually competing against him, competing against he was named the best recruiter in the entire country for a reason. There are so many recruiting coordinators, there are so many other position coaches at other schools and other parts of the country, and J1 Seider was named the best overall recruiter. That is saying something. How did they let this happen, especially now? For the most part, I don't think there's any other context that I can add to kind of sum it all up again over these two segments, is that sometimes you're just looking for a change. I mean, I'll speak personally. I've moved on from jobs before just because I was looking for a change, but it doesn't make sense when, and that's in the scheme of things, right? Part-time, jobs in college and stuff like that, comparable to what your career actually is. So that's comparing apples to very small oranges. But J1 Seider is looking for that change, a new scenery. He's getting a pay raise. He's going to be one of the highest paid position coaches at Notre Dame. Was Penn State in a position to financially compete after they just made Jim Knowles the highest paid coordinator in all of college football? Knowles was making $2.2 million. We know it's on the books. He's going to make $3.1 million. That is almost $1 million pay raise. And then if he were to just simply be the highest paid coordinator overall, that would have been 2.8. So he's getting an extra $300,000. J1 Seider, why is he not entitled to that? If there's an institution that is going to make that kind of move for whether it's recruiting or just him being a position coach to be the highest paid, he has to be at the end of the day. And Notre Dame doesn't have to disclose their financials because they're a private institution. Notre Dame is probably making him the highest paid position coach in the entire country. I don't like this. I don't like this move. I know that Penn State's going to be able to recover. James Franklin is always prepared when a coordinator, a coach, a position coach is going to move on. This is also a double whammy because you lose J1 Seider as one of the best position coach recruiters. You lose Khalil Ahmad as well. I don't think we should neglect the fact that I don't know that I should necessarily have devoted an entire episode to Khalil Ahmad leaving, but to go take that general manager-like front office role with Temple, you're getting hit in two regards, where you lose a coach on staff that is really good at recruiting and then one of your best recruiting coordinators on the team. So Penn State's really got to, this hurts the long term more so than the short term. Like I said, Nicholas Singleton, Kaytron Allen will be staying. Potentially the running back depth chart could take a hit. I mean, Tyke Hayes is already enrolled early. So I mean, things are fine, but clearly not ideal. So let's talk about potential replacements. As Stan Drayton makes a lot of sense. Recently fired Temple head coach, with the connections that he has on the eastern side of the state of Pennsylvania. That could be an ideal replacement for J1 Seider. We'll talk about it more after a quick break. As I promised, quick break. So Stan Drayton, former Temple head coach. This one makes a lot of sense. From the Ohio area, played at Allegheny College in Pennsylvania. So the connections to the area, this is the top candidate to replace J1 Seider in my mind. He has you see how Penn State values former head coaches, right? Greg Cattuso coming in as a defensive consultant, for example, but they value head coach experience, guys that are very close to becoming head coaches, and Andy Kotelnicki, self-sustainable coaches, and Stan Drayton fits that bill to a T. He's coached for the Chicago Bears. He's coached at Ohio State. If this guy settles back in and he's going to leave behind the head coaching role because Temple let him go. It didn't ultimately work out, but this is your home run hire. Don't look any further than this now. If they can't convince Stan Drayton to join staff, Other names to know: Savon Huggins over at Boston College is a potential replacement, and Demir Shaw over at Rutgers. So what do these three candidates have in common? It's the Pennsylvania Northeast, particularly Pennsylvania and New Jersey. I think Penn State realizes they don't just recruit and evaluate for the current cycle, and they'd be bad at their job if they did. But it's more than just about recruiting in 2025, 2026. What does 27 look like? What does 2028 look like? And yes, losing those inroads to Florida is bad. You want the connection to the state of Florida. Now, granted, you still have Phil Troutwine, but that's besides the point. J1 Seider, as we've pointed out, was the best overall recruiter for position coaches in college football. But Drayton and Huggins and Shaw all have connections conveniently to the Pennsylvania, New Jersey areas. Yes, of course, Ohio, but I'm generally speaking, what is their primary focus on? Hey, dominate the state. Is that Pennsylvania is getting ready to crank out a bunch of impressive high school talent that you do not want to let go. The class of 2026 is off to a great start personally for Penn State, but because of all the talent that is from the state of Pennsylvania that they've been able to recruit. So they're going to double and triple down on let's dominate the state. Let's also look to New Jersey and build. So that's the plan. That is the plan, that Penn State is going to go all in on its recruitment of Pennsylvania, New Jersey, the surrounding areas and stuff. And how do you do it? By making one of these hires among the three. There, of course, are there's going to be other candidates. Like I said, it is tough to project, to say who's going to make a lateral move, who's going to want to leave, who's a former coach that really isn't doing something right now. Like I said, like a Stan Drayton, he just got let go from Temple. So he's available for this reason, but that would be, any of these hires would be solid. Stan Drayton's the top candidate in my mind. He's the first phone call that you have to make. And if you land him, he can easily assume that role, but it just changes from the regional recruiting. So where Penn State becomes a strong, significant player in Florida, now you just add to Pennsylvania, you add to New Jersey, you add to Ohio, and I think that's where Penn State really wants to focus its recruiting efforts. I'm not saying that they will never not recruit Florida again. My point being is that I think for Penn State, it is a little more convenient to focus on the surrounding states, focus on PA, Ohio, and not that that needs to be explained, but it is something worth pointing out that if you look in advance to 27, 28, Penn State does its further scouting down the road. Which prospects are going to stand out when those recruiting cycles become the main focus? And who can you position on staff so that you are not left behind, so that you are not scrambling? And that's how you would do it. You would make one of these hires and you would focus on. So that's what Penn State's going to strategically do, that is hire a candidate that has strong connections to. I mean, look at Jim Knowles, for example. St. Joe's Prep graduate. He's already starting to rebuild the connections there. I mean, he's from the state of Pennsylvania, so this fits what James Franklin says. We talked about for a portion of time that it didn't seem like it was dominate the state, and then Penn State came back, but now this is the true emphasis again. This has big indications for what Penn State wants to focus on in recruiting in the near future, aside from developing running backs. And Stan Drayton can certainly do that. Huggins at Boston College can certainly do that. Demir Shaw just developed Kyle Monungai at Rutgers. So imagine giving a Huggins or a Shaw, and that'll be interesting going up against Bill O'Brien as the head coach, to take somebody away from his staff over at Boston College. But imagine giving Shaw and Huggins the resources, the connections that Penn State has to go along with their potential. I like Stan Drayton above anybody else. If they miss on him, that is crucial, but they can pivot to some other names as well. So I can jump back into the comments section for a brief moment here and see if I can find my spot. There we go. So we're on the same page. Demir Shaw, potential candidate. Yes, he is. Penn State really wants to get into the state of New Jersey more so. Not that they aren't already, but they want to capitalize on the presence in New Jersey. And that's why losing somebody like a Khalil Ahmad is a big deal. Seider is a great recruiter and manager of the running backs room. Unselfishness, but Nick's development, among others, has left some to be desired. Are we implying that Nicholas Singleton hasn't reached his potential? I find that I think Nicholas Singleton and Kaytron Allen have developed appropriately. I don't get is J1 Seider the best running back developer in the entire country? Maybe not, but you don't want to lose him. He is a good running backs coach. He is a good recruiter. He's an elite recruiter, but he is also a really good running backs coach. Like I said, circumstantial things. Okay, Ricky Slade is Ricky Slade. Never really panned out. Noah Kane. No, bad luck. Journey Brown, bad luck. So Seider, Miles Sanders, right? J1 Seider's been around for a long time, right? Miles Sanders, I know he hasn't exactly panned out in the NFL aside from his time at the Eagles, but J1 Seider's not really responsible for what they do deep into their NFL careers. He had a really good career at Penn State, and J1 Seider deserves credit for that. Nicholas Singleton and Kaytron Allen, do you know how difficult it is to recruit co-starters at running back year in and year out? And Seider has done that, aside from the class of 2023 with Cam Wallace, Quentin Martin, Corey Smith. Class of 2025. They were getting ready to do the same thing for the class of 2026. It's a big loss. You have to be able to recover, but it's a big loss. And again, going up against Notre Dame. And he's just simply not a friend. He's an enemy. And that's not good. Franklin will never win a championship at Penn State. This is their best chance at it. This season. What about Tony Alford? He had a job, I imagine, offer, who would probably come for good money. I don't doubt it. Like I said, these are the three candidates that, talking to my sources and everything else and just kind of exchanging names, these were the three that are going to be immediately on the radar. This is why winning a championship is so hard. Too many variables, too many moving parts. Yes. After Jim Knowles was signed and the deal was completed, to go through this entire staff, and J1 Seider was a part of that, but Andy Kotelnicki, Jim Knowles, and then J1 Seider and Anthony Poindexter and Phil Troutwine and Terry Smith. Penn State really had one of the, probably, if not the most, top 5 complete coaching staffs in the entire country. And they still have that, but just without J1 Seider. We can talk about, so who would be the co-offensive coordinator? I guess that's something that should be addressed as well. Ty Howell. I think Ty Howell would be the immediate in-house promotion. James Franklin has spoken very highly of Ty Howell. I could see him going eventually the Ricky Ronnie route, and he will definitely be considered if and when Andy Kotelnicki moves on for an appropriate head coaching job. That Ty Howell is poised for a pay increase, a title change at some point in time. Hopefully that's in-house at Penn State, but eventually Ty Howell will get his due reward because of just how, look at him developing tight ends. Even though they don't have the title, Ty Howell certainly already contributes in the offensive game plan. So don't think of it as Andy Kotelnicki sits in his office by himself and just game plans throughout the week. It was a combination of Andy Kotelnicki, J1 Seider, Ty Howell, Danny O'Brien, right? They all get together. But for anybody that has a misconception that just because they don't have the title doesn't mean that they don't collaborate, that's not true. Everybody collaborates, but the decision makers at the end of the day. So for defense, Jim Knowles and Anthony Poindexter they will make the final decision, but they have collaborators along the way with Terry Smith, with Deion Barnes, with Dan Connor, right? So the same thing goes offensively. You're just losing, this is where I'll finish up, you're just losing that consistency. It's not only about Notre Dame, it's not only about the recruiting, this is the national title run. In my mind, this is championship or bust. And that is not me implying that Penn State, James Franklin, and that this is the end all, but it is the largest window of opportunity for Penn State to win a national championship when you bring back a third-year consecutive starter quarterback, two four-year consecutive starters, co-starters at running back, which is what we're talking about here. The running back position. Singleton and Allen could have, honestly should have, went off to the NFL. They're coming back to Penn State. And then you bring in a Jim Knowles. So to lose J1 Seider just kind of knocks that off balance. Why not next season? I guess that's just not appealing enough. That the national championship, you're close. But for personal reasons, I can understand if that kind of outweighs what you're doing professionally. I get it. I get it, especially when there's financial incentives involved. And Penn State, I don't think, is in a position to get into another financial bidding war. They did that with Jim Knowles. They went all in, and I don't think they anticipated J1 Seider abruptly leaving like this after they went all in for Jim Knowles. So it is national championship or bust in my mind because of the window of opportunity. That does not mean that Penn State, and this is the new age of Penn State football with the commitment from Neely Bendapudi, Pat Kraft, the alignment that has been spoken about, but now it's actually there. It is actually there between all aspects of the university, between the political side, the board of trustees, the president, to the athletic director, to James Franklin himself. You have that, so they're certainly going to make a strong push for a strong running backs coach replacement. So don't think Penn State's going to settle here. They are going to get the top available candidate that they want to, but in this case, if Notre Dame is really going to outspend them, I think they were in a tough spot given that they just had to outbid for Jim Knowles. That's where we'll wrap it up here on this live edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. Thank you so much for spending the first part of your Super Bowl Sunday. I imagine there's probably a lot of Philadelphia Eagle fans in this chat. I'm a retired Steelers fan, so I have no dog in this race. I have no dog in the fight. I have no horse in the race, I should say. And I don't want to see the Chiefs three-peat. I'm rooting for Saquon Barkley. I'm rooting for Jahan Dotson. I want to see them do well. I'd like to see Jahan Dotson score another touchdown. I'd like to see Saquon Barkley rush for 200 yards, win MVP. And just for the sake of the NFL, a three-peat champion, Super Bowl champion, is just not good for the sport. So, but Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, they have it figured out. The NFL is supposed to be a copycat league, so I don't know why anybody hasn't hired away Steve Spagnuolo. I guess Matt Nagy didn't work out or whatever, not an expert on the Chiefs, but I'm rooting for the Eagles just because of Saquon Barkley and Jahan Dotson. So Eagle fans, go Birds for the sake of it. Enjoy your Super Bowl Sunday. Eat plenty of snacks for game day. And this is the end of football as we see it on the field, but got plenty of off-season news to talk about now. Spring football's not too far down the road. We got winter workouts right now for Penn State. So for more conversations about your favorite Penn State sports teams, football, wrestling, basketball, we're going to talk about all of it here. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. It is your favorite Penn State sports teams every day. Thank you so much for checking out this episode. Thanks so much for subscribing to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts, being a part of these conversations, and we'll have more of them in the near future.